Welcome to Smart Questions. This is where, as a team, we take challenges that have come up from conversations we've had with clients in the last few days, and we explore some of the key salient points from it. It's not all about what the textbooks would say, and we won't necessarily come up with all of the whole range of solutions, but the idea is that we cover enough that there's at least a good takeaway that you can have that will help you to address that particular challenge or question that has come up. So we hope you find it useful. So welcome to another episode of Smart Questions. I'm here with Granger Forson of BizSmart Gloucestershire. So Granger, welcome.
Hi, Kevin.
Great. What's the question that we're going to try and address now?
So the question this week is, I need to take a new starter on. What would be the trigger points that would start my journey of doing that? Why would I do that?
Okay. And I guess there's probably the question as to whether this is your first employee or really early employee in your business growth, or whether actually you're an established business and you're taking on somebody as part of a team. So where should we start?
Well, let's start with the first employee for a scaling business, and then go to the second point in terms of that. Very much so, because with the first employee, as a business owner, you're starting to get really busy, and you're maybe needing to offload some of the hours, etc., in terms of your tasks. So hopefully you've already defined what those tasks are, and you've got a good understanding of everything you need to get done. That's the first important thing in terms of doing that. Yeah. And then I would then recommend that maybe just try a VA initially. So you're experimenting with offsetting your tasks to somebody else. Don't just recruit somebody just to do that. Maybe experiment with a VA and see that your offloading works, and actually gives you the benefit that you're hoping for in terms of everything.
And whether you're, I think it's a really good point, because of whether you're able to actually delegate, whether you're able to define those tasks that need to be done by somebody else, because just taking on somebody because you're overworked doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to solve your problem.
Absolutely, yes. And then the other really key thing for that, though, is understanding the monetary value behind that, because you're now going to have to pay out more money. Yeah, so eventually that would be a full-time employee, but even with a VA, you've got to have the income to cover that. So planning in advance becomes really important. So it's not just, I'm so busy, I now need to outsource. Actually, you maybe should start it 6 months ago and start to say, okay, so I can see the growth taking place. I know what I want to do and achieve. So let's start planning now. We talked about the processes and procedures you want to offset, but also the money. Start putting the money aside right now, because that's a really important activity, because you need that cash in the bank as a safety net. But also you're proving to yourself that that you've got the income that you need to be able to outsource or insource with the recruitment.
Yeah, and it should be part of that plan, shouldn't it? That you've actually thought ahead, rather than just being a knee-jerk reaction, or I need to take somebody on, which means when we're talking and we can see the image sort of in the background here about those scale-up pillars, those scale-up milestones. If we are simply a one-person business and we're looking to move to employing people and maybe get to have 3 to 4 eventually, we need to understand the business model. And if we're going to be paying people at that sort of rate, good people, are we charging the right amount? Do we have the right kind of business model, or do we need to change things? Because often, and when this falls down for a lot of people, is that we've been doing work ourselves, bit of consultancy or bit of it, one project to the next type work. But actually, are we pricing in the right way that would enable us to pay somebody else to do a chunk of that work? And if we're not, then we're never going to be able to manage to take on people. There just won't be the right money in the business.
Absolutely, yes. So designing the business model is really, really crucial. And a trigger point to help you define that as well is, have I got to wait till I've got as much income as I need to be able to pay somebody or pay the outsource in terms of that? It's also, reality of, let's be practical, but, a point around 50%, because the reality is you can't do everything and you're trying to achieve everything. So around about 50% of the income of the second person that you need, then actually that's the point to actually then really start to say, okay, let's move this off, because it'll free up so much more of your own time to be able to grow, and that individual joining you will give you then the opportunity to grow as well. So it's not waiting to, I've got the income enough, It's actually making sure that you've got that point, you've got the safety net in the bank, and then give it a go, make it happen.
Good. So planning ahead, making sure we've got the money being put aside. If it's 3 months' time, we think we might need to recruit, then we could start putting that money aside beforehand to make sure that we can afford it, but also building up a little bit of a pot, and then maybe that sort of 50% type route if we can see that we're growing nice and steadily. So that, I think that sort of covers quite a lot of for the one person or the early stage. And as you said, defining early on whether actually taking on somebody is the right thing to do or just outsourcing would be better. If we're a little bit bigger now, we're maybe adding somebody into the team, maybe we've already got 4 or 5 people in the team, and we're thinking about, when do we need to hire the next head, whether it might be an IT company, the next engineer, what sort of things might we want to think about then?
So first of all, again, planning ahead. Okay, so design the business structure that will deliver the success for the growth and the success for your clients is really important. So again, planning 6 to 3 months in advance. But also now you've got a little bit of headspace. Now really start to think about, first of all, do you need to do that first of all? Okay, because maybe you could look at the processes and optimize. Maybe you could look at the processes and you can automate. So you could really look at your systems and keep the money first within the business and keep the profitability, rather than bringing in somebody new in terms of doing stuff. So that's the first thing to consider in terms of doing that. But that's not always the case, because actually sometimes you need that specialist skill, because it's a new thing that you're going to do, or you just need that extra head in terms of capability within the business, and that's in your business plan in terms of doing that. Okay, and then again, just like we said, is that trigger point again, making sure you've got the income first, or you may have some financial backing, and it's part of the growth plan in terms of doing things, and then it's the time to actually get those people in place. But it's crucial, yet again, to have the systems, the procedures, the activities already started, so these people can come in and then pick them up and grow them and develop them and make them more successful. You've already got that in place. Otherwise, you're going to have a much longer run-in when these individuals come and start in terms of what you need to do.
Yeah, very good. And I like the fact that you brought in as well that you may be looking to recruit ahead of the sales if you've got a bit of investment behind you. And particularly we see that often when people are going from the sort of 8 to 12 kind of level, maybe needing 20, 25 people where you've got a management team beneath you. Sometimes people get backing for that and recruit ahead, which is really, really interesting. Good. So anything else we need? Oh, one of the other things in there as well that we talked about before, maybe a bit complicated to get into now, but if you're an existing business, you start to get a feel for maybe your ratios, your labor efficiency ratios, as to whether you're running hot or not. So you should start to track that, get a feel, and ideally be operating and keeping your net profit within certain bands. And in an ideal world, it's between 10 and 15%. So you run it so that you're maybe getting towards 15%. That might be tough, but then you maybe invest a little bit to come back to the 10%, but you don't try and drop below that.
Absolutely. And the reality is, when you take on new staff, you've now got to pay those salaries. You've got to have the safety net for those salaries. So yes, your profitability for a short while will, if you're a small business, will definitely drop in terms of doing that. But keeping it between those ranges is really important, and a really great skill as a business leader to keep that going. Yeah.
And maybe one further point. I mean, clearly there are times when some businesses will be scaling very rapidly and taking on lots of people in a short period of time. In an ideal world, again, we probably want to limit the strategic hire, the senior hires, probably to 1 every 6 months, as no more than 1 every 6 months, because by the time you've actually really got them working within the business, if you take on too many, the chances are it's going to be too hard to manage, and you won't get them to be working effectively.
Absolutely, yes, I totally agree with that, Karen. Yeah,
brilliant. Some good stuff there, Granger. I think there's some things there for whether you're in the early stages of taking people on or whether you're thinking a little bit later. It's just some key ideas, but the key thing that came out there is thinking ahead, isn't it? Really,
absolutely. And that's what it's all about. Planning, and really thinking about what that next step ladder is in terms of the success for both the business and your customers, and that way you'll have the growth that you always wanted.
Brilliant. Granger, thank you very much. I hope you found that useful and you've got at least one or two takeaways, things that you can do differently and implement within your business. If you enjoyed that, why not come along to our Scale Up Club? Just give us a bell. It's online. Doesn't matter where you are. You can join us once a month. And why not think about getting a copy of my book, The Entrepreneurial Scale Up System, full of practical ideas and solutions to helping you on your scale up journey.